digital identity is the only way for us to keep the trust going if we want to buy globally, if we want to buy online, if we want to use all of the sharing economy that we are used to now. We need to understand that this process, the more strict it is, the safer we are.
Hi folks, James here, and welcome to the Spyro Circle, this time in collaboration with Forbes Israel. As our world gets increasingly more online, things like fraud detection and age verification are moving the same way. So think about it. We used to go down the road to the shopkeeper or go to the pub, and we'd show our physical driver's licenses or our ID cards to prove who we were. So it only makes sense that as our world goes more online, we are also having those practices move online. An Israeli company called Authentics does this very thing. It does fraud detection and identification verification for marketplaces and online companies in the US and APAC, but kind of all over the world as well. I spoke to the CEO, Yair Tal, all about how the system scans faces, uses artificial intelligence, and helps keep verification safe. We also spoke about things like privacy and data protection, because there's a lot of people that are going to watch this episode and be skeptical over a technology that scans your face. They're also going to be skeptical over the governments that are demanding it or the companies that require it. So I spoke to Yair about all of this, about what it means to build a trust infrastructure online, both for the consumer and for the companies, and what role governments may play in making sure all of this works. Because it's a tightrope, right? You want to be safe online and you want to trust the services that you're going to, but you also want to maintain dignity and privacy and make sure your data is safe. So we spoke about this tightrope and we spoke about the online ecosystem that is developing. I hope you enjoy. Yair, thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, thank you for having me.
There are many different areas I want to discuss today about the online culture of trust and identity and some of the consequences of all of that. But before we get into it, I want to just take a moment to acknowledge the bit of like strange times we live in, because when I was younger, I was always told, don't speak to people online, don't get into any strangers' vehicles, don't go into anyone's weird homes. And we live in a world where we are getting into strangers' cars, we are staying in random homes, and we're communicating online, and it's just a bit topsy-turvy. So I want to talk a bit about the trust infrastructure that is in place to make sure that as we all do that, there are kind of mechanisms and safety measures in place. So before we get going, I want to ask you, please, just to give a bit of an overview as to what Authentics does and where in that infrastructure it operates, please.
Of course. So Authentics in general, we try to support companies with trust. We know that today, almost everything we do it online. Anything from, as you mentioned, we Uber and we find a driver online. We stay at someone's house at Airbnb. We buy food we buy merchants at Amazon, and we act without even noticing it that on a daily basis we consume a big portion of our needs online. And it used to be that we went to different websites and we saw 5 stars ranking and we knew this is safe enough, we can work on that. And it used to be that we had some enough indications to know that we can trust whoever we're actually communicating online. But I think lately this is not the case. And since we got into the deep fake, when we got into the easy way to manipulate the platforms, then we all lost trust. And if you're asking what do we do at Authentics, we try to gain the trust. We try to fight against any new trends coming up that our customers are facing, and to help them to protect their own platform making sure that their consumers will feel safe to go into their platform. And that's what we do. So that's very complicated. It sounds very simple. There are lots of steps. There are lots of challenges on the way, but that's what we do. That's our mission statement. We would like people to keep acting, to keep buying, knowing that they are trusted and they are safe, and the same to give to the companies to know that they can continue their operation.
No, thank you. It does sound simple, but there are, of course, so many mechanisms in place, because the way that, and the things that you described about deep fakes and AI and some of the threats there to jeopardize some of this trust. Talk us through exactly the role that deep fakes play. People may be familiar with them. They may see them kind of online in the meme format, which is fairly innocent and for a bit of fun. But talk us through the ways that deep fakes can be used to kind of to exploit the trust that people may have in some of these platforms, and some of the ways that it can be manipulated.
So maybe in order to talk about the deep fake, we'll go back a bit in time and to see how did we create fake? How did we fake identities in the past? I think we all used to be teenagers. It's happened to be that we were born younger than we are today. And we wanted to go to a party that you needed to be 21 in order to go in, right? So you had different methods of borrowing someone ID or changing something on the ID just to make sure that you can go into
I
the
don't know
party.
what you're talking about. I never did such a thing.
I'm sure. Other than you, right?
I'm teasing. I'm teasing.
No, and the same if we wanted to get a student card when we were traveling in Latin America, we wanted to get a cheaper ticket or something. So we played with that. But then it was about individual playing with the ID. Okay, so it was a simple case that it was an individual playing with the ID. Slowly, we realized that IDs are easy to be changed, to manipulate. And then we all went into the face match. We wanted to take the face, we wanted to compare it with the ID and to see that there's a full match. And it's getting more complicated of what's the background and how deep or how is there a chance for injections that coming into the picture. There are a lot of steps to go along the way. However, the biggest change that we're seeing now that we're all facing with deep fake, that in the past, it was a bit hard to make the changes. So if it was me, for my ID, okay, that's fine. I'm only making one ID. But if now we see for a specific company that there's a payments going into APAC of about 20,000 fake IDs in a day, okay, that we need to block them. And we want to make sure we're catching them. So we're not talking anymore about the individual. We're talking about the massive scale of applications that companies are seeing. And it's so easy to create them with deepfake. So in the past, we saw massive fraud. However, now it's easy to create a massive fraud, and this is the deepfake. And with deepfake, you need to change the whole concept, the whole concept of how you are actually trying to identify the fraud. It's not on the ID level, it's on the repetition level. You want to see how can I see that something was a deep fake, and where do I see the same signature, the same IP address, do I see the same device? There are a lot of things that I have to look into now because this is the deep fake, and the deep fake makes it complicated, but also make it easy to create the fake. And this is really the biggest challenge that the companies are seeing today.
Wow. Okay, it's a big problem, and there are definitely companies that are needed to kind of figure all of that out. Talk us through a bit about where you operate. So you're mainly in your customers and your services. You're mainly in the US and APEC markets. Is that right? So you're mainly kind of in that part of the world,
as well as Europe.
and
To be
Europe.
honest,
Okay.
any global marketplace that will operate mostly globally. Like, let's say we mentioned the car sharing. Okay, car sharing in general, you could expect that the car sharing. Let's say we take a car sharing in the U.S. So the company is in the U.S. The passenger, I would say, the majority are from the U.S. But obviously, you have lots of tourists coming into the US that you need to validate them as well. So this is like you have a global challenge to identify. But take an e-wallet. An e-wallet, by definition, is a global. It's a global provider that they have users all over the globe, and then you need to identify them wherever they are. And this is why when you ask if it's only in the US, it would be in APAC, big e-commerce that you can have in mind, but it can be in Europe, anywhere from vacation rentals to e-commerce that we're also supporting them in Europe, but it can also be banks. It can be gaming companies. So this is actually strong in Europe. So it's coming across different industries. So I would say all over the place.
Definitely. I mean, you mentioned banking as one of the sectors that requires one of these, and I want to double click on that because you come from before joining Authentics. You do have a background in Payoneer, and you have a background in fintech as a sector. So, what I want to kind of just double click on that, and maybe some of that experience and how that shaped some of the work you're doing today. So, what experience did you get from working in the fintech sector that helped you in trust authentication and online services, and how did one shape the other?
We had a phrase that we used to say that we grew as a payment company, as a fintech company, because the banks happens, right? Banks in general, the concept is very local. As much as you see companies, banks that are actually paying internationally, right? You see that most of the banks, that's a local bank paying to local individuals, that they know how to send money overseas. So we were joking that, with the banks, you do SWIFTs, right? But the SWIFTs and the transactions, and this is what we used to say, that because SWIFTs happens, we knew that this is really not cost effective. It's definitely not for scale. And if you want to serve the talented people in Bangladesh, in India, in Pakistan, in Vietnam, in so many places that you have people that they are so talented, but they don't have the opportunity to work for US companies. We knew that an e-wallet that can act globally can bring lots of opportunities to many people around the globe. But then you have a different challenge. And the challenge is, how do I know that I'm working with the right people? When you are a US bank working with the US individuals, you can always collect the social security number and you're 80% protected, okay? Obviously, there are more measures to take, but then you're protected. When you work with some countries on the fintech side, you sometimes get to an address that the address, and I'm serious, the address is the house near the tree behind the garden. This is the address. This is the home address. Okay. How do you validate that this is the right person? Okay. You don't have the zip code. You don't have the social security. You don't have the ID number. And you need to start collecting utility bills that not necessarily will match the address that the person will enter online and so on. However, you know that these people need the money, they need the work, and it's a great potential for many freelance companies, many stock photography companies, and so on, developers, that they can find talented people around the globe. So with that, on the Payoneer side, or without on the fintech side, that the banks that are acting in their DNA is very much local. The fintech is a global state of mind, and the global state of mind immediately brings you into a challenge of how do I know that I'm working with the right people, the people that are getting paid and the people that are actually paying me. And you need to speak all languages. You need to identify them in different places. And obviously this is way more complicated than a local business. So I would say definitely it was a good preparations to join an ID verification company coming from the fintech side.
For sure. I
And
mean,
by the way, which we are also serving many fintech companies today. So it only makes sense that there's a synergy between the two.
definitely. I mean, because, finance or online banking, that was probably one of the first sectors where you had to prove who you were to validate what was going on online. I want to talk a bit more about the tightrope between providing security and identity, but also protecting privacy. Because there's going to be a bunch of people that know about these kinds of technologies or are listening or watching or reading today that are going to be very skeptical over a company that says, scan your face or give us your information so we know who you are. And what would you say to the people who are concerned about those kinds of considerations?
Look, I think we're all concerned that we are now, you and I, we are chatting and we'll talk about one thing, and immediately when we are done, we'll open our Facebook and we'll see that it's for some reason, somehow, I don't know how it's happening, but now I see it on my feed. Privacy is a risk. Everything you do, you know that you're exposed, and I don't know that there's a way to feel comfortable that no one is actually following you. And we see it, and we see the regulators, and we see why regulators are very much concerned about the privacy. And we know that we need to adjust our services to follow the guidelines coming from the regulators. And here's the conflict. The conflict is that you see regulators that are demanding to know who is getting into a website, who is getting into an e-commerce, what do you buy, what do you do. On the other end, they care a lot for the privacy. So how do you balance between collecting as less information as you can, and at the same time making sure that no bad people are going into a website that they shouldn't go into? And it's a conflict. It makes it more complicated. We like it because it's a great roadmap for us. How can we come up with the next product that will allow us to use as less data as we can, but still identify the right person? And maybe a good example for that will be, we work now with a very big marketplace, one of the biggest marketplaces, that they are not allowed to let teenagers buy some restricted products. So you need now, either you are destroying the user experience by asking everyone to submit their ID, to take their selfies and then do the match. But then obviously you will have half of the populations buying on your website. Or you can come and say, once I see that someone will identify a product that they're not allowed to buy, I will take their selfie and I will develop the mechanism to identify their age. And if they have any doubt, then I can ask for the ID. But if there's no doubt, that they can either block them or let them in. Why do I mention it? Because I didn't ask anything about your address. I didn't ask anything about your background, not your ID number, nothing. I didn't ask anything. I just need to know if you are above 18 or you're below 18. And if I can identify that with computer vision, right, instead of actually collecting your data, then I can follow the restrictions of the privacy and at the same time block the wrong people to go into the website. And that's the ongoing challenge that we have. And it's the same, by the way, if you go to the pub, I don't care where you are and I don't care what you do and I don't care what you do for your living. I just need to know, the pub needs to know that you are above 18. That's it. And I can go on and on with different examples and see how you need to balance between collecting less details and at the same time be as protected as possible to your customers.
That's an interesting point you mentioned about the pub. Not the pub per se, but the idea that there's a gentleman who traditionally would look at an ID card and that ID card has all of the information, right? Not just the age, which is what they're looking for, but as you mentioned, it has things like the address, or it has things like, I mean, depending on where the country was that the card was issued, the details differ. But I mean, you're right. In some ways, online systems like this can help filter out, and something that you said that really just stuck with me, which is you want to be able to do the job the best you can with as little information or as little data as possible. So you really want to silo that. So is that what you do, or is that what your customers are asking from you? Like, how does that work in terms of the relationship, and what are your customers, who are these platforms or marketplaces or whatever? So where's the tension there between you guys?
There's no tension. All right, there's no tension. We built we build a platform that can be flexible enough to the customer needs. And we have a variety of customers. It's a wide range of portfolio of companies that they have some with their main concern would be compliance. Some, their main concern will be risk. And the more concern that you have, the more layer of defense that we will add into the solution that we will support, right? So some, they just need to know the basics. And if they need to know the basics, they don't want us or them to collect anything above what they need. Like today with the regulation, you know that you'll be exposed. The more you collect, the more you exposed, right? So you would like us and yourself to collect as less as possible, as long as you get what you need. If it's a marketplace that just need to identify who's buying or who's using their website, or is it a scooter, right? Companies in the street that you just need to know that you are above a specific age, then it's an easy one, no need to collect. If it's a bank, they would like us to collect as much as possible. As far as they care, if we could collect the DNA, they would ask us to do it as well, right? They want to be as protected as possible. So we do it with them. So anytime that we're launching a new customers, we will interview them. We'll try to know what is their concern. Why do they do it? They do it because they have to do it, or because they do it because they are afraid of account takeover. Okay. Based on their answer, then we know how much we need to collect, and we will agree with them to make sure that we have the right flow and we're not bothering the users too much. But at the same time, we're still protecting them. So that's kind of an interview, and then see how deep you want to go per customer, per use case, per vertical, and make sure you do it right. But definitely back to your question, we call it the verified credentials. We know that we would like to present only what is needed in order to prove, and anything else we prefer sometimes not to collect it, and definitely not to present it if there's no need for it.
I can understand why and how you can translate that message to your customers. And your customers are the people that need to collect that information for their product or service for the end user, right? Because you guys don't go directly to the consumer, you operate in the B2B space. So what are some of the challenges maybe that your customers have in conveying the message that you just said to me, which makes complete sense? They have to then convey that to the everyday user, right? So do you work with them on that at all, or is that kind of not your domain? How does that work?
So maybe I should have explain the product we have when we mentioned that before. We collect the information from the users for the clients. So we do the job for them. So let's say that you have a marketplace, and then you are or a gaming company. We will provide you with the SDK. We will do the capturing, so to make sure that this is really you. We will tell you to move your head to the left, to move your head to the right. We need you to focus more lights and all of that, until we will feel confident enough that we did the capturing for the company. We then collected the data from their IDs, and we give the company that we work with an answer: yes or no. Is this James or not? Or is it a fake? Okay. So we do the collection. Okay. Some companies will come and say, you know what, we want you to be more strict. We want you to collect the ID, the face, and utility bill. Okay, so we do the collection. In most cases, or even though we do have some edge cases when companies prefer to do it themselves, but in general, we do the collection. So we literally sit together with them. We define what will make them feel comfortable with knowing that this is really James, and how they would like the user experience to look like. So it's not a B2B, it's a B2B2C. So we do the collections for the businesses, and giving them the answer, yes or no, valid or not, and sometimes even a ranking, valid but high risk.
Okay, good. So the whole point is to ensure that everyone is getting what they need without taking too much, and making sure that people are compliant while honoring things like privacy and trust, and basically building, like we said at the start of this call, the kind of online infrastructure place that's now, it's kind of gonna be going that way. I mean, it is going that way. So what does trust verification and digital identity, what does all of that look like in the future? Because we're in somewhat early days in this. So where do you see it going?
So it's definitely getting more strict than it ever used to be. The deep fake is a threat, and every day you see new workarounds and new attacks that are coming up. And at the same time, you see governments are being more strict on how they collect the data and how they want to validate that this is really you. So we definitely see the digital IDs that are raising now in almost every country. So if in the past we needed to check your ID and to see that there's no fake address on the ID, now you see more countries that you're sending a QR code and you're getting validations from the main source from the country itself. So then you see now on one end how deep fake is raising, and at the same time you see new solutions that are making it more complicated to go around it and to fake it. That's the challenge you see. However, it makes it much more local than the global, because now you need to validate with every country that this is a real person come from the same country. So you need to be even more global than you used to be in the past. And you need to, at the same time, how to be very strict with the deep fake. And lastly, you want to make sure that you are comply with the regulations that is rising as well. And how do you balance between the three of them? So to your question is, um, I think the sky is the limit for what, I don't know that we believed like 6 months ago that how things would be today. And you see this, how things are moving so quickly with AI and different solutions. But you see, in Europe, there's a new regulation coming up next July that is going to be very strict. And you know that they do it because they are saying what we are seeing, that there are lots of fake and people and individuals are losing money because of that. So maybe again, I'm going back to say it's a balance between the regulations, it's a balance between the deep fake, and it's a balance between every country developing their own solutions to protect their citizens. And if you want to be a global e-commerce or global e-wallet, you need to comply with all of them at the same time.
Wow. It sounds like such an interesting challenge for companies and marketplaces and governments, and it kind of just sounds like a complete global effort in the way that there are other ways, right? This is just trust verification or fraud prevention, but there is also the use of AI, or there's also data collection in other ways, right? Like GDPR and other kind of areas of the world that are setting up all of these things. How does that work with you guys? I mean, you guys do the compliance and the requests of the companies themselves, or the customers, themselves. What role does all of that governance play for you, if any? I mean, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's
No, it
the
definitely
customers
plays.
that are doing it.
No, it's like it plays to all of us. Anyone who is exposed to data is part of the game. Okay, and we don't collect data. We don't store data. We know that we need to give an answer yes or no, and then we shouldn't store data. We should protect our clients as well. They're also exposed to GDPR. We want to make sure we're all compliant with that. And this is exactly the dissonance that we spoke about before. You don't want to, first you don't want to collect the data, but you still need to give an accurate answer. Keep in mind that you want to make sure that the same person that you saw today, that they will come tomorrow. How can you be smart enough to know that this is a fraud from yesterday, and now I should block them because of yesterday, but you're not allowed to collect the data and you don't want to store the data. So there are lots of things that you need to do in order to, on one end, to comply with the GDPR. You want to comply with the privacy because no one wants to play with privacy, because we care for privacy, and also we don't want to get in trouble by collecting it, so we don't. Okay. At the same time, we need to come up with the insight to see how can we train ourselves to make it a smart decision when it comes to a user that we're seeing again and again. So I don't know if I answer your question, but we are definitely realizing that privacy is number one, and security is also number one. And how do you keep two number ones at the same time, knowing that you are delivering what you expected versus what you're not allowed to do versus and what you can do?
Yeah, that's interesting. I love the way you say that, the two number ones, and how
It
they
is. It is.
and how
It
they
is no. Right. It's not that you can say that my highest priority is privacy and the second priority is security. No, both of them are your first priority, and you know that company that works with us, they are exposed to two things. They are exposed to the risk, and they're exposed to the privacy, and this needs to work together. And that's what you need to do. You need to find creative ways to approve or to deny or to block people if they shouldn't be on the platform, with with understanding that you need to know as less as you can in order to make the decision, and later on do not store it and comply with the GDPR and any other regulation. We work with different regions. You mentioned GDPR. We work with companies in Australia. They have their own regulation. And within Australia, you have per state, you have different regulations per state. It's a one big mess, a spaghetti of regulations that you see all over the place. And you have to comply with all of them.
Is it going to remain fragmented forever? I mean, not just in terms of states within Australia, like you mentioned, but also Australia versus other countries. I mean, it's a common thing that when people talk about doing business in Europe, they have the different countries, or even in America as well, like the different states within to manage things. So with something like this, is it going to remain fragmented, or do you think there will become some form of umbrella, either standard or practice, that might make it all easier for things? How do you envisage the just practicality of something like this?
I remember, again, coming from the payment space, that the US came with the FATCA. They wanted to see that if you are US citizens, regardless where you are, they want to know what's happening with your money. And everyone said, nah, it's not going to work for them. Actually, I'm working overseas. Who knows that I'm a US citizen and what's happening with my money? And what a surprise, they were able to force many banks around the globe. They got fines, and suddenly all banks in many countries around the world, they all follow the FATCA. And then the GDPR, it was very much European issue, this GDPR. And now you see that many countries, they know that they won't be able to trade with Europe if they don't comply with the GDPR themselves. So I do see it fragment. Whenever something is rising, it starts locally, and slowly, it's moving to be globally. Mostly when it comes from Western Europe and it comes from the US, quite quickly you see that local countries are adopting it because they are forced to adopt it. Otherwise, they won't be able to trade with the US and Europe. So, and we see countries that they're saying, you know what, as long as you comply with them. By the way, same in the US. In the US, you have different rules per states. Some states are saying, you know what, if you comply with California and New York, this is good enough for us, and we'll stick with that. And I'm sure that this will continue to behave like that, that it will start locally and then immediately will be adopted, or not immediately, but fast enough will be adopted to be globally.
No, I completely understand, and I share that point of view, actually, and even just the regions that you were highlighting, because it's Europe gets a bit of a tough reputation for being not much of an innovator, and for wanting to put on guardrails, and for wanting to kind of regulate these things. But actually, in some ways, they're setting the standard down the road for how these things are going to operate, like you said, because if something like GDPR comes along, then companies that want to do business there are going to want to adhere to those. And that trickles into CCPA in California. And then, as you said, California acts as the kind of tip of the iceberg for all of the states in America. What do you think is the biggest misconception that people may have about digital identity, whether it's from the governance point of view, or the user experience point of view, or the business point of view?
In a way, I think none of us likes to go through the process to be identified. Okay. And none of us likes to go to an airport and to go through the security, right? It's a pain. You need to open your bag, take out your laptop, take off your shoes, go through the security. But at the end of the day, once you pass the security, you know that you're in a safe zone. You know that it's good that they do it, because now when you are standing inside the terminal, you know that you are safe. Okay. So it's a pain. However, you trust people that they do something right, and now you're in a safe zone. I think this is the same with digital identities. It's a pain. When we were young, okay, when I was young, that was a very long time ago, okay, I knew the task was about me and the local grocery store. That's it. We knew the people that we trusted, that I could go take something and pay later. My parents would come by. There was lots of trust. We live in a generation that we buy everything online. We trust people that we don't know. You mentioned it earlier. We go on a car share ride at the middle of the night in a place that you would never go into someone else's car. This is where we live today. And the digital identity, this whole process to go through, while it's a pain for you when you need to go through it, you know that someone else won't be able to go through it. I opened my youngest daughter. She turns 16, and finally she can have her own bank account. Done with me giving her my credit card and showing her the Apple Pay, and do a negotiation with a 16-year-old that she's way smarter than me and she knows how to negotiate. Okay, we've
It
done
sounds like
through.
it's as much of a gift for you as it is for her.
Oh, you have no idea. Like no idea. Don't call me. Done. I don't need to approve transactions. Done. And when we opened the bank account, I saw that she was annoyed that she needs to take a picture. How she looks in the pictures. She wanted to take another picture again. That she needed to go through the whole process. And while she saw it annoying, I was very happy that this is a process because I know that then no one else is going to steal her money. No one else that if the process would be easy, then I know that she is exposed. So in a way, what I want to say is the digital identity is the only way for us to keep the trust going uh, if we want to buy globally, if we want to buy online, if we want to use all of the sharing economy that we are used to now, we need to understand that this process, the more strict it is, the safer we are. So I guess it's always a competition to see how can we move as fast as we can to make it a smooth experience. Like we see gaming companies, they pay a fortune to do the user acquisition, and then if you're being too strict with the ID verification and the entrance, then you may lose them. On the other end, you know that you're less exposed, that someone will steal your money later on. So that's kind of again the balance of how safe you want to be and how patient you are to go through the process.
Definitely. I mean, the idea of building a safe and trustworthy society. I mean, to bring it into your example, which I loved about, going into the store as a child and taking whatever, and then your parents kind of coming back later to settle it. It's building that trust economy and that trust infrastructure from the physical world into the digital one, as it's unavoidable that we're all going online one way or another. Yair, I have to unfortunately close our conversation. We're approaching the end of our time, but I do want to ask one final question for you, which just I want to dive into your psyche just a bit deeper, and I want to ask if trust is the invisible infrastructure of the internet. So if we're going to be building this trust infrastructure, what keeps you up at night about it?
I think the biggest risk and challenge for everyone is to be two step ahead of the next fraud that you will experience, that companies will experience. And I would like to know that anyone who is relying on us building their business, they know that we are two steps ahead of the next challenge that they're going to face. And that's an ongoing. Keep joking that this is like a present progressive. It never ends. Every day when you wake up in the morning, you see something else that you never thought about it before, and you want to see how quick you can respond to the next fraud. And to be honest, how can I be ready for the next fraud before it comes? So if I see, I think that recently we saw in the news different articles about companies that they lost their data, they lost their reputation, they lost customers, they took the wrong people into their cars, people staying in the wrong apartments. This is definitely something that keeps us awake, but it keeps us awake in a good way because it keeps us young. That we need to be creative and think about the next step and what else we should do in our roadmap to support our clients.
Well, that's wonderful. Yeah, as long as there are people in the world keeping us safe and keeping us protected and keeping us where we need to be, but in the most honest and safe and transparent way, then I'm sure the future of digital identity and fraud prevention will be a safe one. I have one last question for
Agree.
you before we go. I said that was my
No,
last
go
question. I
ahead.
lied.
I'm enjoying the conversation. As long as you have time, I'm with you.
I know, I know. I have one last question for you,
Okay.
unfortunately, before we have to close. What is the best way for people who are watching or listening today to get in touch with you? Either follow the company or follow you and just see what you folks are up to.
I would say both. I'm more than happy to be in touch with people that want to hear more, and I'm more than happy for everyone to follow our website. We have a great marketing team. We send lots of materials. You're welcome to follow us, and again on LinkedIn or any other way. I'm happy to be in touch and to answer any questions that people may have.
Wonderful. I'll be sure to put all of those links down at the bottom.
Thank you.
Make sure they are bright and clear so everyone can see them. Yeah, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you for your
a
time.
very interesting place
It is.
in the conversation about online presence and security and privacy. So I loved getting to know all about it, and thank you for keeping us all safe.
Thank you. Thank you.